Welcome to yet another main episode on the Ace for Waves podcast with me, Annabelle. And today is Monday, January 6th, which means that yesterday was the finale of the regular season of the NFL. Lots of great games, some closer than others. Other teams just blew out their opponents and such. But now that we are officially at the end of the regular season, I thought I would do just a regular season recap of some of the teams and the storylines throughout the entire season. I'm not going to do all 32 NFL teams because that would be a very long video, but we'll just do some of the stuff that I found intriguing, found interesting, stuff that was talked about in the sports media, and kind of recap that. But to start, the playoff teams are set. We have the NFC teams representing the NFC, AFC teams representing the AFC. Both the Lions and the Chiefs got a first round bye, so they get an extra week of rest and to prepare. But then wild card weekend starts on Saturday. Then there's a few games on Sunday, and then that we end on the Monday. So next weekend should be a good lineup of teams. We'll see which teams advance, which teams go home and such. But the Lions and the Chiefs have secured the first round bye and the first seed overall. But let's talk about some teams that did not have a great season this year. If you recall, I did an episode back in February about how it's time to stop putting expectations on certain teams. And one of the teams that my brother mentioned was the Miami Dolphins and how they have certain expectations to live up to by missing the playoffs or barely making the playoffs last season. Obviously, they missed out on the playoffs this year. They were close to securing a berth, but with the Broncos win, that officially eliminated them. And I think we can call the Dolphins season kind of a disappointment. I know that they missed Tua for the 3 or 4 games when he was out with a concussion. So that does obviously play a role in that. But if you take what the Dolphins have done this season, it's nothing that stands out. It's not extraordinary based on what they have been able to do in the past. And with the addition of Tyreek Hill, acquiring him from the Chiefs, it was supposed to give Tua another kind of weapon to throw the ball to, and he didn't have necessarily his best season. He missed out on the playoffs for the first time in his career, but the Dolphins just didn't do anything kind of spectacular. And they do have certain expectations to live up to, and they did not meet those expectations. Another team that had expectations was the Cincinnati Bengals. They missed out on the playoffs as well. And when you missed out on the playoffs, when you have an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow threw for over 4,000 passing yards this season. He threw for the most passing yards than any other quarterback in the league. Jamar Chase was got his triple crown or was very close to getting his triple crown. So when you have an elite quarterback and you have an elite wide receiver and you have other key pieces around the offense to throw the ball to, that should make you a playoff worthy team. And the Bengals did not make the playoffs. So could we call this season a disappointment from the Bengals? Sure. I know there was problems on the defense. The Bengals fired their defensive coordinator this morning. I think they're hoping that bringing in someone new and starting over could evaluate this team further. But it's kind of shocking when you have a quarterback who threw for the most passing yards in the NFL and you have a wide receiver who has his triple crown and the team doesn't go to the playoffs. That is shocking. Another storyline this season was, can the Dallas Cowboys make go back to the postseason again and win? And right from week one, we saw them play the Cleveland Browns, who I assumed would be a very good team with a very good defense. And they made the Browns defense look like just average. The Cowboys went in completely, took care of business. So that gave some hope for this team and for this franchise. Obviously, as we all know, the next week they got blown out by the Rams, and then they just kept losing. They couldn't win on the road. They won some games on the road, but they were barely squeezing by. They got absolutely blown out at home. And then their quarterback went out with a season ending injury. I would say that this season for the Dallas Cowboys in particular was a failure because you failed to go back to the playoffs. You failed to defend your NFC East title crown, and you failed to elevate your team further. The Cowboys did not make moves in the postseason to acquire players that they absolutely needed. They let go of their running back and Tony Pollard, got Rico Dowdle as their starting running back, which Rico did have a great season. He did give the Cowboys some yards. He did prove to be a good running back. They should absolutely re-sign him in the offseason again because I think he proved himself to be a good running back for what the Dallas Cowboys need him for. We didn't see much of Dak Prescott. We only saw him for half of a season. But if we just go based off of half of the season, Dak did not put up good numbers. He was turning the ball over again. He did lead a come from behind victory at the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is very hard to win at in Pittsburgh. So I do give him credit for that. Obviously, if I had a whole season to kind of critique and judge him off of, my evaluation might be a little different, but I can't. I can only evaluate what I saw in the first 6-7 weeks of the season. And what I saw was a quarterback who did not deserve to be paid that $260 million contract that he was given for the next 4 years. Now, obviously, this is not a diss to Dak at all. I think Dak is a good quarterback. I'd even go as far as to say that he is a great quarterback when you look at all the other quarterbacks in the NFL. But is he worth $260 million? No. Did the Cowboys ownership wait to pay him till the first game of the regular season? Yes. They should not have waited that long because if you think about it, now you have players who are entering free agency. You have to pay Micah Parsons, who is a great defensive back, one of the best players for the Dallas Cowboys defense, and arguably a top 10 defensive player in the NFL with what he's done. You're going to have to pay Rico Dowdle when he becomes a free agent. You'll have to pay all these other players, and you're going to have to acquire people in the postseason, which is what the Cowboys are notoriously not doing. So if you can go into the draft, you're going and draft a good player, draft a player that you can develop, right? Draft a player that you know can make an impact onto your team. That I believe that does help. And then obviously in free agency, get a player from free agency. I know there's players available on the market. Right now, what the Cowboys really need is, I think they do need a wide receiver. That's not a dig to CeeDee Lamb or like Jalen Tolbert or Devontae Turpin or any of those guys. Those are some great wide receivers. But if you can go in, get another wide receiver for Dak to throw the ball to, I believe that does make a difference. Go in and draft an offensive lineman. Zach Martin is nearing the end of retirement. And such. The offensive line needs some development and some growth. And obviously on the defensive side too. There's just things all around that the Cowboys need to work on. Now, another kind of maybe hot take is, do the Cowboys bring back Mike McCarthy for another year? His contract is expiring towards the end of the season. I have seen mixed opinions on this thing. There's some people leaning towards just firing him and starting over. And there's some other sides that are advocating to keep him. I don't have a definite answer for this, but if Jerry Jones doesn't know who he's going to bring in as the next head coach for the Dallas Cowboys, then you've got to keep Mike McCarthy. It's as simple as that. If the general manager, right, and the owner and the president doesn't know how he wants to proceed and he doesn't know who to bring in, you have no choice but to stick with your head coach that you have right now. And it's as simple as that. And Jerry Jones is not a great owner, and he just isn't. And I said that. I might receive some heat for that, but I don't think he's a great owner. Now, if he does know who he wants to bring in as the next coach, then by all means, you fire Mike McCarthy. By all means, you start over and start new. Mike's a good coach. He won a Super Bowl in Green Bay, but Green Bay is not the same as Dallas. Dallas has now won in the postseason, which is what every outsider, every sports insider has been saying for years. Can the Cowboys get over the postseason slump? And Mike McCarthy has not elevated this team to get over that postseason slump. Now, a lot of the blame goes towards him, obviously, as the head coach. Dak did struggle in the postseason as well when Kellen Moore was their offensive coordinator. So we can leave some of the blame there. The defense last year looked awful against the Packers. Some of that blame should also go to Dan Quinn. But the overall blame ultimately falls back on Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones. So there's my take on that. If Jerry knows who he's going to bring in next, then yes, you fire McCarthy, you start over, you have a good foundation base, right? You still have Dak, you still have Micah Parsons on defense, you still have CeeDee Lamb and these other wide receivers and running backs. You still have Trayvon Diggs, you have Micah Parsons on the defense. So you have a good roster. It's all about kind of taking that roster and coaching them and elevating them. So that's my 2 cents on that subject. Another team that I was surprised and kind of disappointed who didn't make the playoffs this year was the San Francisco 49ers. Now, we can have this discourse over, well, the 49ers were injured most of the season. And that is true. Christian McCaffrey was out towards the beginning of the season. He came back for 1 game and then re-injured his leg. So now he's out again. Brandon Ayuk was out for the entire season or for the entire year after he suffered an ACL injury. Drake Greenlaw's been out with an injury. Diamador Lenore got injured. So there was all these injuries. Their kicker missed a few games with a high ankle sprain. I know Brock missed a game as well with his shoulder injury. But injuries cannot be an excuse for why your team doesn't win. Look at the Detroit Lions, for example. They were missing, I believe, 14 players on offense and on defense combined. They were without 14 players on their offense and in their defense due to injury, and they still finished their season 15-2, I believe. So obviously injuries did play kind of a role in some of their losses, but they still found ways to win and they found ways to beat good teams. The 49ers were 1-5 against their NFC West opponents this season. Before that, they were 11-1 versus the NFC West, which is the division that they are in. So they were 11-1 before, and this year they were 1-5. Obviously, you can see the comparison between there. I do think that Brock had a bit of I shouldn't say a letdown, but he did kind of regress a little bit. He wasn't making those throws that we have seen him make in the past. Granted, he was also missing his wide receiver one, so he had to throw the ball to different wide receivers and give the ball to a third and a fourth string running back towards the end of the season. I don't think this is the end for Brock, obviously. He is a great player. He has proven to be a fantastic um, player out on the field. He leaves everything out there. I do think that this season is going to make him even better when you have a bit of a, I shouldn't say a letdown, but when you don't do as well as you had hoped to do, you come back even stronger. And that's what I think the 49ers will come back and do. I think they will learn from this season, make some changes, just like the Dallas Cowboys need to make some changes. We Jake Moody with the high ankle sprain. I I do believe that that was a cause for why he missed so many field goals and PATs once he came back from that ankle injury. I think it did mess him up a little bit. I'm not defending why he missed field goals that he has made in the past. That's an issue that he needs to work on, and whether San Francisco brings him back or not, I would lean towards maybe looking for a different kicker in free agency or the draft potentially. But those are just changes that need to be made. I have no doubt in my mind that the 49ers are still a playoff and a Super Bowl worthy winning team. They have the right talent around them, they have the coaches around them. It's just finding ways to close out games when they matter most and winning. Because I can think of 3 games right off the bat where they blew a fourth quarter lead, and that led to losses for them. But staying into the NFC still, the Philadelphia Eagles secured a number 2 seed in the playoffs this year. And one of the reasons why the Eagles are so good is the addition of Saquon Barkley. He was 101 rushing yards shy of breaking the all-time single-season rushing record. The Eagles did rest him in Week 18. I think that was the right choice. You don't want to risk getting your players injured, and it was against the Giants. So would it have been would it have it would had it been cool if he broke the record against his former team? Yes, but again, you gotta stay cautious. I think if you played him against a very just not good Giants team, it might have taken away from that a little bit. But Saquon Barkley's been incredible, and there's been arguments made that if he had gotten that single season rushing record, he should have been named or been a good candidate for that MVP race. So that's kind of an NFC wrap up. Going to the AFC, the Chiefs finished their regular season 15-1, I believe, 15-2 actually. They lost to the Broncos yesterday, but they finished out 15-2. Their only losses were to the Bills by a touchdown, I believe, or 10, and then they just had a blowout loss to the Broncos, but it kind of didn't really matter since they already secured the number 1 overall seed. The Chiefs are looking for a three-peat this year. They won back-to-back Super Bowls. They have a chance to make it back to the Super Bowl again, so we'll see how that goes. The Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen. The Bills look great. I do believe that this is the year that Josh Allen can make a statement in the playoffs and get his team to a Super Bowl. Obviously, the road to the Super Bowl and to the AFC Championship will run through Kansas City. Granted, if Kansas City loses in the second round as the number 1 seed, it would run towards the next highest seed who advances and so forth. But that's also an eye to keep out on. The Ravens made the playoffs again. We'll see if Lamar can take his team back to the AFC Championship and have a chance to redeem himself to make it to the Super Bowl as well. But kind of a sleeper pick in the playoffs in the AFC is the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos do face the Bills at the Bills, and I don't think it's going to be a blowout game as what some people expect. I did watch a little bit of the Broncos game last night or yesterday afternoon, and their defense is legitimately very good. I know the past two games, if we can discredit that for a minute, I know the Broncos defense in the past hasn't really been spectacular, but against the Chiefs, they looked dominant. Patrick Mahomes did not play. Travis Kelce did not play. Isaiah Pacheco did not play. So those are three of the Chiefs' best players on the field, and they sat them out to rest. Does that kind of impact the score of yesterday's game? Yes. Had those players been out on the field, I believe it would have been a closer game than what we saw from 38-0. But we also have to keep in mind that this is the same Broncos team who very nearly beat the Chiefs back when they first met. And they would have beaten the Chiefs had the Chiefs not blocked a potential game-winning field goal from the Broncos kicker. So we saw them match up pretty evenly in the first matchup. Second matchup doesn't really count. But I think this Broncos defense is really legit. I do think that they can get to the quarterback and force him to make throws and force him to pass the ball that you don't really see him do or make. So we'll see how it turns up. I'm I I do lean more towards the Bills. I do favor the Bills more than the Broncos, but I would not be surprised if the Broncos defense causes problems for Josh Allen. And then we'll leave that there. And then the final thing I want to talk about for the regular season is the race for MVP, most valuable player. I do think that there are two legitimate candidates right now, and that is Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Both had incredible seasons this year. What they have done is nothing short of extraordinary and excellent. These are two very elite quarterbacks who produced some great content, who left it out all on the field and gave it their all for their teams. So I would not be disappointed over who takes home the trophy, but the question is who deserves to win MVP more, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson? And if you ask me right now, I think my winner for MVP is Lamar Jackson. Again, not taking away from anything that Josh Allen has done this year. He's been incredible. But Lamar is the first player in NFL history to throw for over 4,000 yards, over 4,000 passing yards, and run for 800 yards. No other player in the history of the NFL has ever done that. He's also the first quarterback in NFL history to throw for over 40 passing touchdowns and throw less than 5 interceptions. I think Lamar got to 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions with his 2 touchdown passes against in week 18. So he was first to do that and first to throw for 4,000 and rush for 800. He's the first player. There's been some very all-time greats in this game for quarterback, dating back to the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, etc. But if you're the first player to ever do that with Lamar's size, he does not look like he should be a quarterback in the NFL. I've seen people discuss that before. He is not built like, the typical NFL quarterback. So when you take that into consideration, what he has done for the Baltimore Ravens and such, that is remarkable. And that is, in my eyes, what the MVP is. He's your most valuable player. If you can get yourself a quarterback who can not only run the ball and get yardage, but can also throw the ball throw the ball deep and trust his receivers to make plays, that's incredible. Now, I will give some benefit to Josh Allen. He does have more rushing touchdowns than Lamar does by a considerably large amount. So we all know that Josh Allen can run the football and run the football well. Josh Allen doesn't also have many grade A wide receivers, so to speak, to throw the ball to like Lamar does. Josh does have less weapons, so that makes his passing yards in his season look more incredible on paper. But it's a two-man race at this point. Like I said, I would not be disappointed over who takes home the MVP award. Both men are incredibly deserving of it. Josh Allen has still not won an MVP. He's been close in voting in the past. So I do believe his time is due for one. But like I said, Lamar has had a historical season this year, and we might not ever see it again in his career. But and I'll leave that at that there. And feel free to debate your MVP in the comments, or let me know who your vote for MVP is. Like I said, if Saquon had done that single season rushing record, there could have been an argument that he would have been the MVP for the Philadelphia Eagles. But I also saw a comment that Micah Parsons made about if Joe Burrow had taken the Bengals to the playoffs, then Joe Burrow should have won MVP. And just to discuss that quickly, Joe Burrow is really the only reason why the Bengals had a shot at making the playoffs. Joe Burrow was the only quarterback, I believe, to throw for over 4,500 passing yards, I believe. And he was tied for first in passing yards, and he was first in passing touchdowns. I want to say he had 36 passing touchdowns or something like that, or maybe even 40, and still missed out on the playoffs. If Joe Burrow had taken the Bengals to the playoffs, you could have made a case that he should have been MVP, but with 8 losses as well, you can't really overlook that. And if a team has 8 losses, I don't think your team deserves to have a player in the MVP conversation. That's kind of my ultimate take on it. The Bills have, I believe, 3 losses. I think the Ravens have 4 or 5 losses, I want to say. And then no one's really talking about Patrick Mahomes for MVP, but I don't think Patrick has had the season like Josh and Lamar have had. So with that, that's kind of like a regular season finale recap. Had a little bit of an MVP debate, and then looked ahead towards the postseason as well. Oh, also really quickly, I want to disclose the fact that the Carolina Panthers won more games than they did last season. So we have something to look forward to. I will say, I know I've given the Panthers crap before. I've said it before on both predictions that I have no more faith in them. But Bryce Young did look very promising against, I already forgot which team they played, and that's so bad, the Falcons. He did have 5 total touchdowns. He does look like he is improving. And like I said, I think benching him was the best thing that could have happened to him. No quarterback ever deserves to be benched, especially a starting quarterback. But sitting behind Andy Dalton for a few games, just watching him, learning from him, and then getting his starting position back, you did see a change in him, and you did see the way that he was able to play more confidently and be more free. Did the Panthers lose games when he came back into the starting role? Yes. Did the Panthers lose when Andy Dalton was the starter for a few games? Yes. But I think they are finally coaching him. They're finally developing him. So hopefully his performance yesterday was a sign of good things to come. I think the Panthers are leaning towards the right direction. Obviously, there are some key pieces still missing, but I think their future looks promising. And I can't say the same for some of these other teams as well. So I think with that, finally, we're going to end this episode. Thanks for watching, listening, whatever you guys are doing. We'll be back at it again, hopefully next week, where we can recap the first weekend of the playoffs. Let me know who you're cheering for. Who are your picks to represent each the NFC and the AFC in the Super Bowl, and who's your pick for the Super Bowl champion? It's hard not to pick the Chiefs, but do you think the Lions are going to make it to their first Super Bowl in however many years? Are the Eagles going to represent the NFC? Are the Vikings going to represent the NFC even after their 31-9 loss against the Lions? Let me know that. But for now, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.